Yeah, I have a question. If I am my awareness, my knowing awareness, will I ever be able to experience, feel, and perceive after my body dies? Or will it be that I fall asleep and never wake up?
No, there's nothing to suggest that when the body dies, the activity of your finite mind comes to an immediate end. You see, from this point of view, that what we call our mind, our internal experience, and the body, they're not two separate things. None of us are now experiencing our bodies in the way that everybody else sees them. All I can see of my body now is it's about 2% of what you all see. I can see a couple of little pink blur somewhere down here, and that's about it. That's all I can see of my body. If I close my eyes and ask what I feel of my body, I'm not in pain at the moment. There's barely any sensation. There's a little tingling sensation where my legs are sitting on the chair and my feet on the floor. That's about it. So you all are experiencing much more of my body than I am experiencing. 99.9% of my experience is the world and all of you, and 0.001% of my experience is what I call my body. That doesn't mean to say that I'm not having internal experience. I'm having thoughts, feelings, images, memories. So there is internal experience, but that internal experience appears to me as thoughts, sensations, and perceptions. But I appear to you as a body. So what I'm suggesting is that my internal subjective experience appears as a body when viewed from a second-person perspective. So it's not that the body and the mind are something separate. It's just that the body is what the mind looks like when viewed from a second-person perspective.
But the body is also what you use to perceive and to feel and to experience, right?
Sorry, just to carry on what I was saying. So the body in this model is a collection of energies. It's the activity of mind. It only appears as a body made out of matter when viewed from a distance. So when a physical body dies and begins to disintegrate, what is really happening in terms of subjective experience is that this localization of mind is beginning to delocalize. That's the internal experience of death, the delocalization of this tight knot of thinking and perceiving. Now, when this knot of thinking and perceiving, called my subjective experience, begins to unravel at death, that is viewed from the outside as the dying person, the disintegration of the body. But my internal experience is one of the unraveling of thoughts and feelings. But there's nothing to suggest that this unraveling of thoughts, of internal experience, just comes to an abrupt end. There's nothing to suggest that it may lose its integrity. The image I often use that I borrow from Bernardo Kastrup is the image of the whirlpool in the river. The whirlpool is a localization of the river, made only of the energies of the river, but it has a coherence to it. And from the outside, it looks like a whirlpool. From the inside, it's just a flow of energies. And when the whirlpool begins to lose its form, this would be the death of the body. The coherence of the whirlpool begins to dissipate. It's no longer a whirlpool. At some point, the whirlpool loses its form. That would be the death of the body, or the disintegration of the body. But the energies that went into the make of the whirlpools expand into the broader medium of the river, and they may still exist as ripples in the river, although they are no longer constellated as a whirlpool. So there's nothing to suggest that the energies that make up your internal experience now will come to an end abruptly when your body dies. There is nothing to suggest that they won't simply expand back into the broader medium of mind and continue for some time, or even gather together downstream and form another little mini whirlpool.
So it will not necessarily be like falling asleep and never wake up.
You consciousness never fall asleep. There's no question of you consciousness falling asleep. You may cease to localize yourself in the form of a particular character. So that character may not reappear. So from the character's perspective, the character may die and never reappear again. But what is the character? The character is simply a localization of consciousness. When the character on the streets of Paris that you dream about is run over and dies, the dreamer does not die. All there was to the dreamed character was the dreamer's mind. When the dreamed character dies, all that happens is that the dreamer's mind ceases to assume the form of the dreamed character, but the dreamer's mind doesn't die. Well, it's the same thing. When our body dies, consciousness simply ceases to localize itself in the form of each of our minds. So from the perspective of the character or all the other characters, this localization no longer appears. So we say that person has died. That person is never going to reappear again. That's true. But the reality of that person, infinite consciousness, has not died or gone anywhere. It has simply ceased to localize itself in the form of that person.
So in your opinion, if you die, you are still able to experience, feel, or anything like that?
Your experience wouldn't be an experience of the world requires us to be localized very specifically in the form of this body-mind in order to be able to perceive the world. So you wouldn't be able to perceive the world, but I'm open to the possibility that there would be some kind of experience.
Thank you.
A kind of delocalized experience that was a transition between the tightly localized experience that we have now while we're alive and being completely unlocalized as infinite consciousness in which there is no objective experience. I'm suggesting that there may be somewhere in between these two where there is still some form of experience. In other words, the river is not motionless, the river is still rippling. The ripples are the activity of the river. Their mind is the activity of consciousness. So it's true that those ripples have not coalesced to form a whirlpool, so they're not a clearly defined person. But there could still be ripples in the broader medium of the river. Likewise, there's nothing to suggest that the activity of mind may not continue after the death of the body, before the mind comes to rest completely as pure consciousness. It's just a model. All models are inaccurate, so don't think that this model is too accurate. But hopefully our models convey something of the truth. And this model is, to me, it's a very sane model because it's entirely in line with our experience. It's a model that is based not on conceptual ideas like there must be something called matter outside consciousness that explains the universe. No, it's a model that is drawn entirely from what we actually experience. So I think it's a sane and valid model. Much saner than the materialist model that informs our world culture, which is founded upon a single idea, namely, there is something called matter that exists outside consciousness that gives rise to consciousness. In other words, it's a model that believes that which is never experienced gives rise to the only thing that is ever experienced. I think that's madness. To base your model of reality on a substance, namely matter, that nobody has or could ever find, and then to imagine that the only thing we ever find in experience, which is knowing, is derived from this unknown substance. I find that so metaphysical and abstract and divorced from experience. Whereas the model that we're suggesting here, limited a model as it inevitably is, because all models are limited, is at least a model that that starts with our experience and proceeds very carefully based only on what we experience. I think it's much saner. And if we think of the implications of this model, the implications of this model are, in terms of our internal experience, the implication of this model is peace and fulfillment, whereas the inevitable consequence of the materialist model is unhappiness and despair on the inside. And if we think of the consequences of this model in terms of the outside world, the inevitable consequence of the consciousness-only model is love, cooperation, respect for others, respect for the environment. Whereas the inevitable consequence of the materialist model is, as I say, unhappiness on the inside and conflict on the outside. So not only do I find this model philosophically sound and reasonable, I also feel that it's the model that gives us what we truly want, what we long for in life above all else, which is peace and happiness on the inside and harmony and cooperation on the outside.